music. We're pretty excited about it. That's Mike Giamacco playing with Those Alone, and a song appropriately called Ghost. If you'd like to hear more of that, it's available on String by String, his album available on Amazon, Spotify, all those places where you buy music. Check it out, it's really good. So, my name is Elise Giamacco Carlson, and welcome to our presentation for Duo Demonology. It's been quite a while since we've broadcast. Tonight's topic is spirits of the departed, or something else. It's commonly assumed that ghosts and apparitions of spirits of the dead, that is, insubstantial impressions of once living human beings. T-shirts and bumper stickers say, ghosts were people too. These specters are real, yet, in another sense, they're not. After all, when ghosts appear, they tend to resemble persons. They seem to have bodies, although those bodies don't remain visible for long. They're usually clothed. I've never heard of a naked ghost. If you see a naked ghost, please send pics. After all, sometimes these ghosts notice us as we notice them, and they look in our direction with unblinking stares. They were alive here on Earth, isn't that obvious? They might become trapped here in our physical plane, wandering through a sort of worldly purgatory, or maybe some choose to remain earthbound. They might think or feel that they have unfinished business which keeps them around. All in all, that sounds pretty dismal. Hopefully, eventually, these spirits will move on into the light, or either heaven or hell await. Or could there be an alternate explanation, since, after all, what can we really know? We may not be able to provide the answers, but certainly we can offer you some interesting speculation. To that purpose, I give you our panel, renowned demonologist Carl L. Johnson and respected theologian James Annitto, who together comprise Duo Demonology. Before I leave, I want to tell you, please stay tuned at the end of our broadcast for an exciting announcement concerning an event. And here are Duo Demonology.
We're back.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I kind of like popped out of nowhere there and you like did too, like.
I turn around and there
we
you
did
are. You know, like, what you get here, dude.
And didn't we have a great introduction by our beautiful manager, Elise?
I don't think it could have been improved upon.
Definitely
Thank you,
not.
gentlemen.
It's her. It's all her. That's why.
And please, if you get pictures of naked ghosts, please don't send them to me.
I'd like to look at a couple.
Carl can. He'll tell me how they are.
Oh, are we spaced good enough? I mean,
Yeah, I think we look pretty good. I think we get a double thumbs up over there.
Right. I'll just breathe the air over there. You breathe your air.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, thankfully, Rhode Island is still decreased in numbers, so we are taking the proper precautions here, of course.
It seems to have worked here in our state. I mean, I don't know what the demographics are. I don't know why it has it. People are being cautious.
Yes, definitely. That's all we can do.
I'm thinking that's it.
We've been around each other a lot of the time, so we will say it.
Moving on.
Thankfully.
You know.
But yeah, tonight I think we have a great topic.
Unusual, off the beaten track.
This actually was your topic this week. So do you want to start the introduction of why you chose this topic?
You just elbowed yourself. You know? The screen didn't go down, so we're all set. Why we're talking about this? What we want to talk about?
Why you chose it? Why did you pick Are Spirits Really Souls of the Departed?
Because there's so much talk in the paranormal, in popular paranormal, about, you know, trying to find your lost loved ones. You know, like, are they coming to? Who is this person talking to? Are you trapped here? Do you want to move on? Tell us why you were here. I don't think you're going to get any real intelligible answers if you ask these questions. Also, there have been some celebrated apparitions of late. I've heard, you know, namely Ed and Lorraine Warren are appearing to people.
Yeah, I heard that too, but...
Well, I want to contribute something. Recently, Lorraine Warren appeared to me, and I'm going to debut that on the show. You know what she said to me? It was deep. You are very disrespectful. And that ended there.
Oh, gosh.
I've been analyzing that ever since, but
I totally can see that, Carl, but it's alright. That's why we love you.
I must have said something wrong years and years ago. I don't know what it was.
To each their own, in the past, and you know, they did what they did for the certain degree.
They had their legacy.
And then hopefully, you know, we can make demonology in this time, in this modern society where we're at.
Yeah, they brought it to a certain degree. We want to advance it,
And
but
we're gonna advance
by advance I mean make more people aware of it.
Of course.
So, but why I chose this topic was because people have a set purview of what spirits are. That they either they are spirits of the departed, they're dead people, they're souls, and they're trapped here, they're lingering, or they're demonic, inhuman. It has to be kind of one or the other, right? Well, then there's that atmospheric residual on supposedly they're not aware of us.
Yeah.
I find all these categories overlap.
They do.
They get jumbled a little bit.
I think there's a lot of modern incantations, or I don't know if that's the correct word.
Well, we'll try to improve on it.
Encyclopedia.
Thank you.
But I think basically throughout time, and if you look at the epics of Gilgamesh and Leviticus and all that stuff like that, there's always been through human civilization that we can determine through history, through what we have through records, that there have been talks about ghosts for a very long time. Hell, even the Mesopotamians, right?
Yeah, they
talk about the land of the dead,
but
but
kind of set the standard with that,
They did.
belief in the spiritual realm, and I am sure that as long as there's been human cognizance, as long as I'm saying like the Neanderthalics and Cro-Magnon, using standards there, I think there has been. I'm sure that there's been a belief in an afterlife, in the happy hunting grounds, in the spirit realm. They dreamt. Their loved ones or the departed ones came back to them in dreams, and that was real.
yeah,
It was very real to them.
yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people tend to forget is that this is speculative, this is scary,
Yes.
and we can't doubt the things that people have
As
experienced.
soon as you got written records, there's
Yeah,
talk of ghosts
throughout
coming back.
time.
They're seeking the counsel of their ancestors. In fact.
Well, you think about, look at history, look at our misunderstandings of history. We look at the Great Pyramids, ancient Egyptian culture.
Right.
We're very keen on spiritualism, on the idea of going to the afterlife.
They had a very complex cosmology.
They did.
About what the afterlife and what it entailed.
But look at how long that culture predates. We originally thought that the pyramids were 4,500 years old.
Yeah, that
But-
seemed old enough, didn't it?
But through analyzing, we found out that
Analyzing.
10,000 years old, around
So,
10,000.
it is thought that the Sphinx is about 10 to 12,000
Yeah.
years old. Not confirmed, but that's what's being speculated.
But still, you think about that though.
Yeah,
and
there's
how
some basis for that,
look how long those beliefs of
Because
spirits.
we're going back to what we know of the very emergence of culture,
Yeah.
civilizations, and they had their ghost stories. Generally, it was going and seeking the wisdom of those who had gone before, so they had a belief in an
Yeah.
afterlife.
But also too though is that a lot of people don't tend to forget that is that civilizations, the only time spirits would interact with the living if there was something terribly wrong happening. That was the only time.
That's biblical, for one thing.
The Mesopotamians believed that once you died, you ate dirt, you played in puddles of mud, and you would not speak to the humans. The Mesopotamians would believe that.
They were busy with other things, yeah.
So a lot of people have believed in that there's something afterwards,
Well,
but the ideologies of the spirit communicating to us has adapted throughout time. Once it was something was terribly wrong, now it's people just, there's a message, or there is something wrong. There's something. There's so many
In
different
ancient Hebraic theology,
Mhm.
what was the land of the dead then? They would wander in an abyss. They would, they would not communicate with the living. They could not come back until they did. If that fit the story.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a pretty, unhappy premise of
Yeah.
what they would. The souls would just wander, which comes from the Grecian lore. That the souls of the dead would just wander in an abyss. They would be in a sort of limbo.
And Christianity follow a lot of the Roman belief of afterlife as well. So there's a lot of Romanism within the beliefs of Christianity.
So we're talking about what we generally refer to as the cradle of civilization. You got Mesopotamia, leading then this jump into the Grecian culture and Sparta.
So that brings us back to the point, though. Are spirits really souls of the departed? There has been many interpretations of that,
Yeah.
which usually, not to say we're going to answer the question here and now, but if there is
Let's try to answer the same thing.
But if there's a massive amount of people throughout aspects of civilization, how can we denote the possibility that there's something preternatural that exists, something that is of a ghostly figure or a spirit that like.
Kind of has to be, doesn't it?
Think
Well,
so?
you'd like it to be.
Do you think so?
Oh.
What's your true opinion on it? I look at everything on a like analytical, psychological,
Right, yeah.
like at least a realist level,
Mhm.
and you know, throughout time, my opinion has adapted. For somebody
Yeah,
that's
it
done
does.
this
It
for 47
evolves.
years, you probably were something instant gullible. Or you maybe were more gullible back in the time of starting this than you are now because you've kind of adapted to understand. Okay, this is more natural than the paranormal.
You mean I've become cynical and, jaded. Actually,
You want to use those
I
words?
started off that way.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, to me, it's the big dunno, D-U-N-N-O.
Your
We
word.
really don't know what spirits are and why they are on. I know they are real. I know they exist in that sense that we can perceive them.
Well, psychology, not to play the devil's advocate, because even though I'm Catholic, I'm a deacon with the United States Catholic Church, sometimes it's
You want to play the
well,
devil's advocate.
well, sometimes it's hard to talk about theory or ideologies
Yeah.
because even though I have a faith in God, everybody thinks that because I'm Catholic, I have to have these set viewpoints and can't stray from them in understanding of other people's
I
viewpoints.
think people like to think in terms of definite.
Well, they do, and that's the problem. But
Structure.
a lot of psychologists will say the reason that we see spirits or that we want loved ones is because it's easier process of grieving, or why we think we pass on afterlife is because we want to believe in something positive. Because that is human nature. We strive for something. We always strive for something.
It is inevitable that people the culture should embrace the belief
Yeah.
in an afterlife and a spiritual presence
Yeah,
on this
faith
earth, And it fills a need, yes it does. But you can explain that empirically. You can say, oh yeah, people cannot relinquish the thought of their loved ones. And they have to believe that there's some kind of after existence. So they structure that, they create it, and they look for any sign that can corroborates that. But there's something that goes beyond that. I've seen ghosts, and it wasn't a projection of my mind. I've seen them, I've observed them in motion, I've heard them on recordings. So what are these things? They look like they are ghosts. They look like they are the souls, the remnants of departed, once living human beings. Because as Elise was saying, like naked ghosts. The ghosts wear clothes. They look at me. They've looked at me with an unblinking stare. They were aware of me.
So, what happens if somebody would say, Carl, that's a projection of what you want to see, your mind, and it's possible because through much interpretation that hallucination, when we want to perceive something, sometimes we hallucinate. There's key differences of where people don't understand infrasound.
Yeah.
How infrasound can make you hallucinate.
No, that
infrasound can make you do all these different things. And guess what? A fan gives off infrasound. The fan blades, when it circulates, it gives off an infrasound. So
it helps me sleep many a night.
So what I'm saying though is, are we really experiencing these things, or are these adaptations of what we really want to experience?
Well, the super.
Because a lot of people in the scientific field equate to think that's the reasons.
Say I wanted to make a case for that it's all a thing of the mind. We can't let go of loved ones. We can't let go of those we walk with and we're dear to. So we make them happen. We recreate them. I could sit here for half an hour
talking about that.
And give a good case for it. But then I can turn around with the next half hour and refute all that and say why there are spirits.
Yeah.
Because you can give a good case. Depends on how charismatic the speaker one is and how prepared their notes are. But there's always something else to see now or to say. When I saw the first ghost I actually saw.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if I was young, suppose I was in a state of duress, and I turn around, or I'm so interested in spiritualism, turn around and say, "Oh, geez, I just saw that shadow move. It looked like a person." Well, then I would wonder. I would doubt that. And I'm very suspicious of what I want to believe. But everybody judge. You psychologists out there, you paranormalists. I saw the form of a woman dressed in 19th century attire in my parents' basement. And what was most eerie about it, besides that she was out of time and out of place, and obviously an apparition, was her walking. She took footsteps, which, elevated, lowered, elevated. She was walking but her footfalls made no sound at all, and that was really eerie.
Yeah.
But I saw her in detail. There was no color to her. It was almost like sepia tone. You know, not stark black and white, but there was no real color, or very muted if there was any. I didn't notice any color on her, and she walked toward me, but she was there, a solid looking person. But then she went into the shadow to the side of me and vanished. And I saw her not once but 4 times. And I got a little stressful when I was realizing that I'm looking at a ghost here. Now, what could make me see that? What would be a repeated hallucination like that? Plus, it was not a hallucination that this basement I was in, this cellar, was used basically for storage, and I set up my own room there.
There was mold down there, bro.
Oh yeah, there would be mold, but the mold wasn't moving around the furnishings.
Radon?
Yeah, well, even if there was, like something penetrating the soil, radon, anything, any kind of substrate in that, underneath the foundation, that wouldn't explain why we were rattling around. The dehumidifier would go across the floor. Chairs were, turned right, they were inverted, turned right side up, so it was trying to keep them in order. And all my family heard that. And this was in conjunction with seeing the spirit after all. I would hear the rapping and, rummaging around, it sounded like. Rats couldn't do this. And then I'd see that woman, and we'd get quiet, and I saw the woman. I saw her again, and again. I saw her long enough. I looked at her for about 4 seconds at a time. That's a heck of a long time to see a ghost. I had time to analyze. I had time to memorize. So I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. If no one else believes me, I know what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's associated with the spirit because the voice was imprinted on a recording. I didn't know what an EVP was, electronic voice phenomena. And then I heard on search, that some people do seem to record disembodied voices. And that voice, we had to speed it up to understand it. It was kind of in slow motion. A friend of mine had a recorder that would do that, and it said, "Carl, help me."
Which is interesting.
It was interesting that it mentioned my name.
Especially why it's specific,
I never knew what to do about it. I mean, was this a voice from my future? I mean, was this a distressed spirit? I don't know. Again, it sounded like a human being, and the apparition looked like a human being. So how could this not be a person who has died and is still with us?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like to play devil's advocate.
Well, I'm doing that too because I'm asking that question. How could it not be? I'm not convinced it was.
Really?
I think we have a quantum capacity to create these things during our life. That becomes our spirit. They're imprinted in what used to be colloquially called the ether.
All right.
Something that's around us, not really atmosphere, but what permeates our world. It's projected onto that. We think in terms of 3 dimensions, but maybe it's a plate, and it's projected, and that's what we see. We see our ghosts because they spring out of this plate.
Like a parallel universe kind of thing.
Or a holograph. Yeah, it is like a holographic.
Yeah.
And I think these plates are in motion, and sometimes they bisect. I mean, not to get too technical, if you can get technical.
Yeah, that's very technical, but.
Well, I could take an hour.
Well, it's true though. It's true though. There are in that application what we're trying to express to listeners and people.
Yeah, and there's that saying: if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and it swims like a duck, it must be a duck. Except we're dealing with something that's not.
But the thing is though, there's so many different theories based upon this subject compared to a duck. There are different species of ducks. Maybe people think that a duck's a duck, but it's not a duck, right?
You sound like a quack.
Quack quack.
Yeah.
But the thing is with ghosts.
Are we digressing now?
But the thing with ghosts though, the proper thing with ghosts though is there are so many different theories. There's so many opinions, so many different religious cultures.
We need our theories, we need our opinions as long as they don't.
But they're very similar though.
Yeah.
They're all very
similar.
similar.
Well, that's what I look for commonalities. Yeah. So they're going to unite. It's like a unified field theory you apply to ghosts.
So one of the things that we talk about, and one of our formidable fields that people will come to us and seeking their knowledge is demonology, right?
Demonology has a ring.
So your brother Keith Johnson believes that all souls are demons, and we talked about it
that's
quite
a
few
very
times.
Fundamental belief that all spirits that we perceive are not souls of the dead. They are demons. They are imposters. They're tricksters. They're pretending they're dead people.
Yeah. And do you believe that to be true? Just a quick answer.
No, I do not.
I don't think so.
It's more complicated than that. That it's like a puzzle piece. It doesn't quite fit, so you push it in. Oh, it's sky. I know it's sky. Well, I'm pushing that in. It gives you an answer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
respect that.
I think it's a proper precaution too, don't you think? Because
Well,
if you have that mentality, then you're cautious on what you communicate.
Yeah, but I don't make up my mind definitively about that. I
Of
don't
course,
say
of
that that's the only answer, and he would. Now, how do you know I'm not Keith Johnson? I could be, we're identical twins.
Well, there are physical differences in my opinion. Not like saying like somebody's bigger or not, but you can notice. If you're around you both, you know the differences. You can tell.
Well, he would have different opinions.
Yeah, different.
We're on the same page. We think a lot alike, and yet we differ on the same key points.
Which we don't, which we as well do. That's the same thing, But do we have any questions?
I've got to apologize for the people watching and writing in. I can't say hello to everyone because we're using all of our devices to record this show. So I don't want to touch anything and really send it off kilter. So everybody that's there that said hello to me, said hello to Carl, said hello to James. We say hello. We'll be looking at the names later. I have seen a few questions float by, and if you could type them again, I would really appreciate it. And even if you don't have a question, maybe if you would share this live video with your family and friends and get them to watch too, that would also be appreciated.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, the questions definitely help the discussion.
Yes.
But I think one of the things I want to touch upon is with spirits and communication.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel like spirits use the electricity? Why do we tend to believe souls are energy?
Because they are something, and they need a power source if they are something. They do have quasi-physical properties, like two objects cannot occupy the same physical space at the same time, and they have to adhere to that. They can't be more than one place at a time. They have limitations even for essentially non-physical beings. I don't think ghosts are made of electricity, but they respond to electricity, and they can influence electric devices, gauging devices. So there's some energy to them. They need to be powered. Everything needs an energy. Everything needs power to it, and they may draw from us the energy our bodies emit. The temperature in the room, the ambient temperature seems to drop when a spirit enters the room or manifests. So they do seem to impact the environment. They're not nothing.
Yeah.
They're something we don't understand just what that is. They are on a frequency that we are not familiar with, that we don't travel on. If we can detect their frequency accurately, then we'll find the ghost. And we have things that do that.
We have a question.
Try to. Yes.
Thank you, Ruth, for typing your question over again. I couldn't scroll back to see it the first time. Do you think ancient deities can come back and take possession of the person that woke them? That makes me think of King Tut's tomb.
Poor Howard Cotter.
Poor Howard.
Well, a lot of ancient deities now are equated to be demonic, especially in Christian belief systems.
Yeah, they've been morphed into the demonic.
So,
interpreted.
if can people bring back deities? I think that goes back to, and this is a shout out for Stacey Brown and Bill Brock, which we were on the show talking about Aleister Crowley and his claim of being possessed because of doing a ritual and their rigorous schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But in that same thing, Crowley's mindset was to conduct rituals to summon deities.
Right.
Like Horus and other equivocal entities.
Oh, and of course H.P. Lovecraft's writings, many of his stories.
So,
about that,
I think people tend to always believe that they can summon deities throughout culture.
Like ancient
Summoners.
ones that were once believed in, once revered, now they've gone underground, now they are not associated with holy, above board spirits. So can they be summoned? I have to say yes.
I think with
Now we'll never understand why. With intention, the law of intention, they are imprinted in the ether. They had their own reality. They still do on some level. You hit that resonance or that vibration, that frequency, and you can withdraw them. And you can tap into that circuit once they are encoded and bring them forth. Yeah, I think so. With some perhaps hazardous results.
Yeah, I think any ritual, the one thing people don't understand, even though it is, in Christian or Catholicism, when you do the liturgy of the Eucharist, right?
Yes.
when you're doing that, the transubstantiation.
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 Well, you know it.
But it's basically you're calling in the host.
You are invoking the Holy Spirit,
The Holy
and through
Spirit,
the host, you are taking in the body and the blood of Jesus.
So, but that's a ritual to bring down what some people maybe would form as a deity.
Yes.
But those
Fundamental patterns of ritual.
But there's all different kinds of rituals that have those forms of summoning something or calling upon something.
Yeah.
More so in the paganistic belief systems where ritual will be used or stuff like that. Hinduism has a lot of ritual.
Well, of course, we're more, familiar with the Christian liturgies and the patterns of ritual. Suppose somebody wants to call up something darker and more remote. Suppose they want to call for Dagon. Asmodeus. Should we be saying these things?
Well, I think
You're
that
safe.
I think that you can, because I think we have a good intent. I was saying it's educational.
I'm saying these things actually seriously never bothered me.
No, me neither.
Ouija boards don't spook me. These things don't bother me.
But I think summoning is dangerous. I think if you have the intent to do something negative, then you kind of call what you're asking.
Yeah, we don't advise that you try this, but if you do, let me know what happens.
And seriously though, please do not try it at home. And if you do, which you're probably going to do anyway, we're here to help you.
You Zach Batings out there. We have a question?
Yeah, we do have another question. It is from, trying to do this without knocking it over. Mary, why do some spirits seem to have more power than others?
I think it's based upon the power of free will, because if we call these things intelligent spirits, if we're talking about spirits in the form of like deceased loved ones, I think it's maybe based upon the power of their will, because you got to remember, if we base the concept of spirit on a human person, the one thing that, especially biblical, I'll approach this on a biblical aspect because most people in the world are Christian. It is the dominant religion. So, if you look at it in that form, right?
Is it now or is it about half and half?
No, Christianity is the biggest religion in the world. Buddhism and Hinduism are close. Judaism's very small, and Islam is pretty big.
Well,
I think Islamic is number 3. Could be number 2, but I think it's number 3. But I could be wrong. Those statistics change, but Christianity definitely is the number 1 religion.
Some names are stronger though in these faiths.
Well, no, I think. Well, if they're talking about spirits in a departed sense, I think people tend to forget that humans, through a biblical sense, are made of physical and spirit, while like angels or fallen angels are just made pure of spirit. So the one thing is one thing that we have as humans is free will, right?
Yeah.
Our free will doesn't leave us when we die, in technical belief, right? We have free will beyond our physical conscious, which is our spirit conscious, what people believe in, right?
Didn't Rush write a song about that?
But no, seriously though, so I think it really depends on some spirits being stronger depending on their will. Like a negative spirit that doesn't want to go, like it's very assertive and very parasitical and very manipulative.
I like that.
I think is going to stay longer because to push that.
You mean that free will transcended bodily death
Yeah.
and stays somehow in that spirit?
I think so.
Does not want to leave.
I definitely think so. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I
If you
think will has something to do with it. In fact, that was as defined by the late Anton Xander LaVey, head of the Church of Satan. Now, of course, some of his writings were askew. Some were predicated on sound principles, and he promoted belief in an afterlife, life after death through fulfillment of the ego. And he believed that if you did not want to leave, he said nobody wants to leave a good party. So if the soul wants to remain earthbound, it can stay. The ego will survive. That will to survive will keep that person around even after the inevitable explanation of the fleshly shell that housed it.
And not to say LaVey wasn't a madman, but some of the times even these madmen, like Aleister Crowley.
He was a showman, not a madman.
Well, yeah, he was a madman, but
he could be mad.
But even all those madmen had some sound ideologies, philosophies.
You're talking about our favorite madmen, like Grigory Rasputin,
Crowley, what's it called? Who calls on that laundry list?
Well, he wasn't an occultist, but Basil Zakharov.
Yeah.
Gabriel D'Annunzio. These some contemporaries, all alive in the turn of the 20th century.
Hell, even though he wasn't an occultist, even he, a leader form, like even though he was a very evil man, Hitler,
Yeah.
even he had some sound ideologies. He wasn't
He
wasn't
had a
stupid.
belief in ancient.
He wasn't stupid though.
Our ancient religions.
But all these people, all these very evil people are very intelligent, very manipulative, and I also think that if they were to die, right, if they really willed and hauntings do exist, which I tend to think more so than the place being haunted, the person is haunted. That's my opinion. I don't think the place is haunted. I think the person is haunted. So if you come into a location,
you mean the living person is haunted?
Definitely.
That's something different. Yeah.
Definitely. Wait, why wouldn't you think that? Because you think about it, we talked about it before, right? If the person goes into a location, nothing ever happens, right? They live there.
Yeah, that would explain something. Like some people can move into a home and everything's hunky-dory, but
For-
people that were
forever.
there before, they come in there and, the sugar ball's flying across
They were like
the
a bat-
room and, yeah.
They were
I knew
a
it was
battery
a
to the
situation
toy.
like that. They were a battery to that, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the successive owner, comes, the residents come in
And which they're seeking for it, though. They're seeking for it, so of course there's going to be.
It was their
some
vibrational
interaction.
frequency was compatible with that house.
Yeah. And
In that sense, it's producing phenomena.
we won't drop on what house we're talking about. Of course, we're talking about the Conjuring house in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Great house, great place, but yeah, that transcends.
The house seems to embrace some people, and they have a good feeling about it. Kind of eerie, like being watched. But some people are, oh, this is a wonderful place. Other people it chews up and spits them out.
So
It doesn't want them there.
But you say something that is interesting to me because
You said something was interesting.
if we go back to our spirits, really souls of the departed,
Oh, that's a good reminder.
the one I'm gonna wait. But the one thing that you always say about the house, and you've been repeated to say it. We've been on radio. You've been on many of your own
I'm very
interviews.
reputable.
Is that you say that the house is the activity, like the house has built its
Well,
own
that's a very
consciousness.
general state.
So
Yeah.
would you say that because the house has its own consciousness and like that idea, is it really spirits of the departed? Is the house creating this because of so much thought form
It's a
within that?
conglomerate and it's a construct. I think so many people have lived there and had emotions there
Yeah.
over the decades.
Mm.
The house was built, 1736?
Very long time.
Yeah.
It's one of the oldest houses in Rhode Island, if I'm not mistaken.
And so the house has become its own entity. It's
Yeah.
like almost like an organism, and people who come in there and they get a good feeling or a bad feeling. Well, if it doesn't want you, it will spew you out.
Yeah.
You'll have bad experiences there,
So-
or bad dreams if you stay the night. But it's a lot of individual emotions and consciousnesses that have contributed to that have fed the fire.
So let me ask you this: to feed the fire even further, would you say because of the reputation the house has, the people that go in it with a certain mindset will spike that to what their mindset is?
Yeah.
Do you think their play is what the emotion of the house is?
They align with the emotion of the house. Sometimes the emotion will respond to them, and that's when you get more activity if they find like a kindred soul there in a living person.
Yeah.
Given that, I don't think anything that overt happens in the house these days. I mean, things happen, and it's spooky, yeah.
I want talking about the subject, and while in the Conjuring house, it actually has a lot to relate to this topic. I'm kind of glad that we transitioned to this. Is one thing that Andrea talks about in her subject about this house. One of the people that lived there, of course, the oldest daughter, is she said that there was an experience. I believe the mother Caroline had it.
Yeah,
Caroline
that's severe.
is that in the where the parlor is, right, where the fireplace
It's now the
is.
parlor room.
She had an experience where she came across people sitting at the table.
Isn't that interesting?
And she felt like she was, they looked at her, she was the intruder.
Carol and Perrin had that experience while they were living there before I met them.
Mm.
And I met them in 1973. The year before, she'd come into the parlor room, which hasn't changed. Some of the furnishings are a little different.
Oh,
They haven't
yeah.
really changed it, painted it or anything differently. She came in and she beheld a vision, very palpable vision, of men seated at a round table, like a tavern table.
Yeah.
And they had tankards, like pewter tankards, and they were dressed in very old-fashioned clothing. And they turned and looked at her. They were aware of her, and she looked at them. So for
Startled, right?
yeah.
Could you imagine?
So for a scant moment, Carolyn Perrin was
She
the
was
ghost
the
for
ghost.
them, and they were the ghost to her.
Isn't that an interesting story? So
That-
our,
yeah, it's it's nice, and I believe it.
It makes you wonder, though.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder. Are we, like you said, is there a parallel universe where there really isn't that conception? Maybe we do actually die, but we see what we want to see on the other side somehow. Maybe we can tap into it.
Well, that's
I think
what we want to see.
I don't know if we have any more questions, but Mama said that she had some spiritualism questions.
Well, we'd like to hear.
Well, we've got a couple of questions
All right.
from our viewers.
All right,
okay, what are they-
Paraphrasing, because it has scrolled by and I don't want to mess up this phone where it's sitting. Why do we only seem to see ghosts from a certain period of time? Why are there no cavemen? Why are there no hippies? Why are there no, medieval people walking around, knights in shining armor?
Well, and now, without even being able to answer that, we can observe that ghosts, as far as what's sometimes you see really what is thought to be ancient spirits, not as common. They seem to run out of power, don't they? And there seems to be this influx, this real interest. And why aren't we seeing, well, maybe we do see more modern ghosts, but we don't see them as often.
Well,
They start, as far as the conglomerate of ghosts, the most frequent apparitions, and we're based on their clothing, their costume, it seems to start in the 1500s, 14 and 1500s, and then goes to the 1800s, and so many 19th century ghosts around.
Yeah.
That's where they see the ghosts. You're not, I mean, it's startling to see a ghost, but you're almost not surprised if you see a ghost of someone dressed like in the 1700s or 1600s or the 1800s. That's a pretty good ghost.
see, I'd have to say that's dependable on the area. I believe we have that interpretation because we're in
If you're in
America.
England, you're probably going to see.
Maybe in England you're going to see older. If you go to Africa, you might see older ghosts. You got to remember where civilization kind of like comes from. So I bet if you go to a lot of these older places, you might have the ability to see a spirit from that timeline. But we talk about Native American spirits, right?
Yeah.
How about Native Americans or?
But they probably didn't dress that differently for
Well,
centuries, did they?
Well, they've been around for a long time, right?
So they're enduring ghosts.
It's very tribal, but people have experienced seeing Native American Indians, have they not, of different
Yes.
standards?
Yeah.
So we do, I think
And
we
in this
do.
country, you get a lot of colonial ghosts.
And for what reason is that? But people do seem like physical modern ghosts. Like people always say, it's
Well,
bad
we do.
humor.
Sometimes we see people that look apparently normal, like dressed in fairly modern
Yeah,
clothing or
definitely.
unremarkable
Oh, I
clothing,
agree.
and then they walk through a wall or something. So there's something to it. Yeah, I'm not discounting 20th century ghosts. We see a lot of 20th
I think it's like I said. Do you agree? It's dependent on where you're located in time.
I think that batteries run out. Well, there weren't as many human beings on the planet before, but I think after a time, they don't have the power of the impression, the presence
The
to
will.
generate.
The will, maybe.
I don't know if it's volitional on that part.
Remember what we
Maybe
talked
they
about?
just
If they're,
give up on
if they're intelligent,
Maybe they've had enough
they
of
have
it.
a will, or maybe, like if we go back to the free will aspect, if you don't lose your free will when you die in your physical body, do they just give up? Like, oh, nobody wants to talk to me, and my family line's dead. There's no reason to stay around anymore.
That's
You think about that, right?
theory. I wish they'd answer me about it. Do we have a speaker?
On that same vein, why wouldn't a person who was known to definitely want to come back and communicate with the living once they passed not be able to do so?
I like that.
What's
Harry
an example,
Houdini.
though?
Harry
What's an
Houdini.
example? Harry Houdini.
Well, he didn't believe in it. He refuted it. He abolished.
He refuted the spiritualists.
He was always passionately interested in the spirit world and communication with spirits. That means, although, that's why he was driven to debunk false mediums, because he wanted to distill that and get to the core of it. What's real? He did want to communicate with spirits.
But he wanted to. His goal was to disprove in full volition, definitely.
Yeah, but he didn't want to say there's no afterlife. He was always interested in the spirit world. He wanted to contact the soul of his mother.
Yeah.
You know.
But he never found a way to, though. That's still.
Well, he went from one, medium to another, and and eventually started to expose them.
Yeah, definitely.
One medium came through and said it was his mother, and he said, "My mother never spoke English; she spoke Hungarian." Well, things are different in the afterlife, but they try to get her to speak Hungarian.
Yeah. Never happened.
No.
Yeah.
And what about Harry Houdini? The jury's out on that, whether he ever came back. One story tells us that he had a code. He and his wife, Bess Houdini, had established a code that he would relate if he came back. One story says that she got the code. It was like a sequence, and that he confirmed he was aware he had survived bodily death. But there is a very famous recording of Bess Houdini, and she conducted an annual Halloween seance because Harry Houdini died on Halloween, and you've got her voice saying, "Harry, one last time we reach to you. You have been silent these many years, and now forever we put out the light." Now that's her words, so I mean,
And that's exactly what it sounded like too.
yes, she did. Oh, you should hear.
So you're saying that she was able to speak to Harry?
No, I'm saying she said she didn't.
She didn't.
At least in that recording, and that was the last seance they had. So why wouldn't somebody? Yeah, obviously the rules are different over there on the other side. But why wouldn't Harry Houdini come across in a way that we could understand?
It's very
Maybe he gave signs that we couldn't interpret. Maybe he just couldn't. Maybe he was like, "I get through." Maybe he just couldn't. There was
maybe. Also, another opinion too, another theory out there is maybe somebody that wants to tell what happens in the afterlife. Maybe they're ruled against doing so.
Well,
maybe there's rules where they
I think
can't
that's
say this is
the-
because out of all the time investigating, the Harry Prices, the Hans Holses, the Johnsons, the Warrens, all these people, the scientists,
funny people.
Carl Jung, all these smart people, Charles Babbage, Charles Dickens, all these
spiritualist people.
all these people that have dabbled, Nikolai Tesla, Thomas Edison, out of all these people, and plus many more that have dabbled with the paranormal phenomenon, why haven't they ever found out an answer to what happens after that?
There's just not enough information.
So maybe
insufficient
Harry-
data, we can't know.
Maybe Harry Houdini
Maybe he
can't
didn't.
come back because he wants to tell, so maybe he's restricted.
I
Right?
never accepted that.
Maybe he's
I
restricted.
never thought that there's a rule that says you can't. I think they just genuinely cannot. In a way we can comprehend.
You would think
Now,
that there'd be a rule then,
What
right?
seems to be is persons who have recently died, they come back and give some word of comfort or confirmation to their loved ones. To the
But they don't
people
tell,
they're
they
close
don't say what happens afterwards.
to. They
right?
can't stick around long enough to do it.
Or, well, I know people that tell me that their family ones visit them all the time because they clear
Even
right?
after years.
After years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right?
possible. I've heard that too.
So why can't
They just say
why
the
can't
impression
they,
seems
why can't
stronger.
they, why can't their family members say this is where I went? Right? Why can't they?
Do you know
Why?
what?
Why?
I heard there was a haunting.
I want to hear this.
It was in
Why
Virginia,
can't
and it was Civil War soldiers.
they? Yeah.
And they actually talked to this boy and his sister. He started, and then the sister would come. They go into the barn, and they would see them but they only saw them up in the loft area.
Yeah.
You know, above the stall, the stalls there. And they saw them in the barn, and they would ask them questions. And at first, the people would just look at them. These Civil War people.
Yeah.
It was like a Civil War hospital, but some of them were in uniform. And one of them answered that what their existence was like. He said, it's like sleeping without dreaming. And then we awake for a time. And then we go back to that sleep.
See,
But I don't know. I
See,
wasn't there for it.
yeah, and there's no recordings of. There's nothing. See, so like I understand personal experiences, and people have had a lot. I've had plenty of them. I've been to a lot of things that should have had recordings, should have had
Yeah.
photography, and you experience, and you're like, oh man.
Well, I was in a possession case many years ago, 1980, and I wish demonic possession. I so wish I don't have any recordings from that.
I have many cases,
Yeah.
and I feel like when you're dealing with people, like to a certain extent, like in that sense, when like you're kind of doing that ritual, I never record mine visually.
I always relied on other people to record.
Well, I always like I'll document beforehand, but when you're working with a person,
Yeah, you get lost in it because you figure somebody's going to remember it, write it down. Somebody's going to be recording, and somebody's going to be taking pictures. It doesn't always happen that way, especially if that's 30 years.
But still, I want to get back to the topic of how like spirits have not been able to communicate an answer to us, and I know people maybe say, oh yeah, well this person told me. Well, once again, that's something that you were told, so it's not on recording.
My feeling is
There's no group
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, it's limited, but why? Is it because we perceive this to be true, and we don't want to tell ourselves what happens afterwards because then it would demoralize us living? Like there is nothing. There is nothing.
I'll tell you, my mother passed away last October, and I sometimes hear her voice when I'm really down and really missing her. I hear her voice
Yeah.
comforting me, but it's not like.
But there's a
feel I'm
psychological
under
element
stress.
of that too. That's,
Yeah, well, it could be because I want it, and I'm very
you want it
suspicious.
so much.
But I don't believe that I will hear it when I do because I'm very suspicious of anything I want to believe. But it's so palpable. So I hear her very unique voice echoing. I mean, I hear it sometimes, and I can't quite make out what she's saying, but I can hear enough of a syllable, successive syllables, to kind of know what she's telling me. Why don't I just hear it, like plain? But I hear her trying to come through. It's like almost like she's talking loud to me to get through, and she's given signs. But these spirits, why don't they just say, "Oh, I'm here"? I
Yeah,
don't
right.
think they can. I think they want to. I don't think they can. I lost somebody close to me, and there was that first week. There were a lot of signs that she was still around. That anybody with a belief in these things would say, "How can you possibly doubt?" Because I wanted to believe. But no, there were signs enough that convinced us that she was still around, but then the sign stopped.
I'm not doubting your experience. See, what confuses me though is back in the days of like a Gilgamesh and stuff like that, the spirits would come in terribly wrong times and they would say this is kind of wrong. So why has that changed in ideology and opinion when spirits used to say this is what's wrong, used to come and say this is what's wrong? Now they don't tell
I think
us what's
people-
wrong, right? Why has
Yeah.
why has that switch? Why don't
Well, people
spirits
used
say
to be closer to the spirit world anyway.
Think
because
so?
There weren't as many distractions. There weren't many people
That's
around.
true. There's many distractions,
Yeah.
but I think that you say that though the paranormal world as it is wouldn't be as expansive as it is now. Like when you started, it was minimalist, if anything, right? There was nothing like it is nowadays.
Well, yeah, as far as the volume of people that were interested in actually
So you can say that
going
there's more distractions.
investigating the paranormal, yeah, that was somewhat frowned upon. And I will admire the Warrens for that they were pioneers. If the Warrens had money, Ed and Lorraine Warren back in the 1950s, if they had money for gas, you'd go to a haunted house. If they had money for groceries, they would choose the gas money so they could go to a haunted house. They were true pioneers.
They wanted to experience it,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I've had many
I
experiences.
think they began very sincerely, yeah.
I think everybody does, and sometimes people wiggle away from it. But I think that the idea of getting this field, of course, is always
Yeah.
the what ifs. Like, not to use his name in our favor, but there was one thing, like you say, to know. Brian Cano once said, somebody asked him a question, what is a ghost? And you would think somebody like Brian Cano, who's been on
Yeah.
television like yourself, right? Who is an expert on like paranormal caught on camera, you would think the guy would say this is what a ghost is and come up with some terrible response. But he gave the greatest answer of it all. I don't know. And that's the best answer you can always
And
give.
that's what I would say when I would
You know?
when I would introduce the ghost hunts at Slater Mill. When I was at Slater Mill, I was there for 14 years, and since 2008 we had ghost hunts there.
Which was the start of the Industrial Revolution, so I bet you had a lot of experience.
Oh yeah, the building constructed in 1793. Oh, we had ghosts. Yeah, we did. They were real ghosts. But I would always start by saying I've been at this for like 45, 46 years. I still don't know what a ghost is. I know they are something. I know they exist.
Definitely.
And what they're made of, what they,
What's the reasonings?
why they're not consistent. Well, we could call them forth though. I had a formula for calling them forth. Some of them, the shadow person in the stone mill would, that was up to him if he put it in there. Sometimes he'd throw something across the floors. But in the Slater Mill Museum, Slater Mill property, yeah, we could coax them to come out and they'd answer.
Plus, I bet they get used to you too.
I think they might.
People say, like I
Hope they miss me.
I hear this from a lot of investigators, and I really necessarily haven't seen it because I have laid dormant at a location for over and over and over again. Like I've probably investigated one location probably not maybe 10 times.
Well, that's a lot.
Like for like a public investigation.
Slater Mill was far more than 10 times for me because I had worked there.
I've done residential investigation, probably like a residential. I've probably gone there probably a good double digits times.
Yeah.
But like public investigation, like a haunted house, like people go to, I've been like I said 10 times, and I've always had different experiences. So I could see the thrill of wanting to go to these different locations and seeing if every time you go, there's a different.
Yeah, well, that was my advantage of being employed at Slater Mill, that it was an ongoing experiment.
You were there all the
Most
time.
days were business as usual, but sometimes during the most blasé days, giving tours to a school group would come on their field trip, and then something would a child would say, 4th, 5th grade, say, I saw somebody look out the window and they described what other people had seen. Or
Which is
something,
interesting.
or
yeah.
something would fly across the room while they were there, and every once in a while you'd get that.
See,
You know?
I don't wish for it, I never would want it, but I was not the person that was the quintessential, like, I grew up in a haunted house, like, I know what it is, like, to me, like, I've had minimal paranormal phenomenon happen, like,
I was always
that I
interested
could
in that.
not
I did,
explain to some degree.
Right.
I think everything I've come across, maybe beside individuals that were under possession, those 3 times that I could say that there was something non-physical in that room.
Yeah, and you know what's rare for me is when to see activity to a degree, to a level that it would
Yeah.
actually drive somebody out of the house.
Yeah,
But then again, when you're living with it, it's that element of the unexpected. You don't know when it's going to strike, so that's scary.
But I truthfully never dealt with something beside those 2 things that I could never, that I can't say that there's possibly something that was natural of occurrence within that realm. Even like, I think cases that I deal with people with poltergeist or psychokinetic, I do believe in parapsychology to a spectrum side, so I do believe that has a disconnection to spirits and ghosts as well. So I think a lot of the times people kind of want that because of trauma, and they create.
Well,
these realities.
yeah, the
I think
ghost
that's what we
serves-
experience more, and that's a
The
natural
ghost serves
occurrence.
a purpose
Yeah.
in that sense. If somebody has like they disassociated themselves from past trauma,
Yeah.
or they have unresolved conflict, the demon or the ghost fulfills
Sometimes-
a purpose.
I mean, sometimes they're best friends, sometimes they're imaginary friend, even though we don't look at it as that in an adult form. Some people create a form
You
because they want
wonder,
something
like,
positive.
did they create it or was it there and they started realizing it and,
Well, the word
responding?
topa's been around for a long time,
Yeah.
right? Thought forms, so that has been
And I'll tell you, this ties directly into what we're talking about tonight. Panorama Paranormal had an investigation. Somebody had contacted us, and this person was hearing the voices. He had a lot of trauma, a lot of strata in his life, so not everything was so settled. But he was working his way through it very well, and we'll call him Joe.
Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
Alright.
And so Joe had us in, and things were happening. There was writing on the mirror, bouncy balls bouncing around the room with nobody throwing it, and he had some stuff going on. But basically, his problem was why I was uncomfortable was he was hearing a voice demeaning him, telling me he's worthless and he shouldn't go on.
Yeah.
And there was also he missed his father, felt he had more to say to his father, so he felt his father was his protector. But he's hearing this voice deriding him, calling him names, saying he's worthless. It was almost like like a delinquent child telling him these things. So we're like, okay, now this is a perfect psychological profile. He's hearing the voice, trying to resolve his conflict through this voice in his
So
ear.
it's imaginary thought.
Yeah, and this actually started after he was injured in the line of duty as a police officer.
That could make sense.
Lost half his hearing.
Yep.
So, but he would hear this voice, and so we're interviewing him, taking a statement, recording. Guess what? Police played back the recording. There's the voice.
It's pretty crazy.
The voice is the voice he's been hearing,
That's
and it's
illegal.
putting him down.
It's
And
there.
saying you worthless. The son of a gun, and say, why don't you just kill yourself?
Do you think he created that? And do you think it created an intelligence to it?
Oh, I don't know. I think.
Or do you think something was actually haunting him? Something that was manipulating him?
I'll say something really contradictory. I think it was both. I think it was there,
You think so?
and I think he gave it added substance. But you'd hear this, it was coming out with sentences, so
Pretty great.
that was one of the most fascinating situations with which I've been involved. The voice
questions?
he killed.
Do you have a question, Mama?
Again, like I said, they scroll by as you guys are talking, and I really don't want to mess up
It's fine.
these phones.
How about your questions? Let's answer your question, because I know you had one, right?
I don't remember what my question was. You guys are talking about free will and spiritualism, and my question's just always because, as he calls me the killjoy, I'm a realist.
I love
That-
the Killjoy.
Yeah.
We try to investigate things using what they call scientific method, which usually means all things being the same except for one little detail. Can we replicate this?
Yeah.
Well, it always happens when this one detail occurs, and nobody's been able to do that yet with the paranormal.
Nobody-
But if in fact you're dealing with personalities of people who have passed, you're probably not going to. Just trying to do a scientific experiment with a live person, it's not going to work. So there's your
Well,
quandary
yeah.
of saying you're trying to study it
The
scientifically.
mental organization of a spirit, a departed soul, is usually pretty poor. They have trouble answering questions. They can only answer things in little spurts and all that.
And what really surprises me too, which is actually great on this, is we've been talking about intelligent haunts and thought form. One of the things that we really touched little on, and I believe Slater Mill had this as well, is residual hauntings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting to me, Mom says that, because I bet if you go to a place and you record it every day, if it in fact had residual haunting, you should have that loop. Every day there should be a certain process, because the point of a residual haunting is that it's imprinted that the same
Yeah.
process was
One
done.
more thing.
They would go up the stairs every day. Like, if you think about it as humans, right? We do the same thing almost every day. We go to work, well, most of us, right? We go to work, we drive home from work, we make dinner. So everybody almost has the same process, right? So if we leave this imprint, technically, if there's residual hauntings, would it be based upon the personality that's there, or should that residual haunting always be
That
at root?
is probably the most common, if you can call it common, type of ghost. The person who went through in their life, they went through a certain routine and they keep doing their routine.
But the same thing is, though, why is that routine not always captured? Because there's times where it's
Yeah,
not.
you can't.
If you
It's very hard to do it, or impossible to do it scientifically, because it's not replicated on a regular intervals on a daily basis. But you
well,
do,
residual
yeah.
haunting should be. That's why it's called residual
I was
haunting.
in
It's
case-
like a record. It repeats, repeats, repeats. It's not
Yeah.
intelligent. It
The
doesn't
situation-
change.
The
It's
situation
residual.
I was in Brooklyn, New York, I stayed overnight and I heard in the kitchen, I heard shuffling around and,
Lots
did
of
I wear dinner
hands.
yet?
Yeah.
Which didn't sound that normal, except that there should have been nobody in there, so I went in there into the kitchen with some trepidation, it's like 2 in the morning, and by God, there's nobody there. And it sounded so normal, people going about their business. So it does make that imprint, but you can't wait it out, and you can't, sometimes you get results. But it's those plates, they're in motion, sometimes they bicep, and then you get your crossover, you get your haunting. But yeah, it makes an imprint.
Pretty interesting. It's like a
Yeah.
big puzzle, right?
Yeah.
It's so many puzzle pieces.
It's like the case of the laundry woman or the factory worker, somebody who had the same routine for decades perhaps. They are seen as ghosts, they tend to.
So let me ask you a question. Oh, do we have a question?
No, I was just going to tell you have 2 minutes left, and I was going to ask one question.
All right, let me ask you a question
We
first.
want your
Are
question.
spirits really souls of the departed?
Ooh,
That is the title.
maybe.
Maybe.
I say some are, I say they are remnants, they're impressions.
Yeah.
Some are.
I say maybe undecided, because if we knew, then it would be a fact, and there would be a yes to that.
Yeah. Some of them have senses of humor, I think they're inextricably intermeshed with living people. I think they made their impression during life, and in that sense they are souls of the departed. What their ultimate destiny is, if they're just like souls that are trapped, I just don't, I have trouble believing that, They're here for a while, they stay around, maybe they have their own existence.
And then my question to fall off of that is, I was going to ask you, and it falls great with that, is do you think in our life, yours and I's, or even my life, that we'll figure out what ghosts are?
No, because people have, there's so many alternate explanations. I'm trying to go on that they are quantum. They are impressions, and therefore, since they proceed like once living people, essentially they are. But I think they run out of steam after a while. I think their hologram loses its vitality after a time.
Before we make our announcement, I say no as well. I don't think we'll ever, but I truly do think, because we are humans and we like to doubt ourselves, that we have come up with an answer of what ghosts and spirits and all these are, but we second guess ourselves and we try to come up with a new theory to
I think we have
backtrack.
an
Instead of
intuition
backtrack.
about what they are, yeah.
But
If we come up with a more definitive answer to that, we'll say it at the next show.
yeah.
Then we'll figure it out by then.
Yeah. But so I think no as well. I don't think we'll ever figure that out. But Carl, so we have a big event coming up.
Yes, we do.
When is that? October?
October 10th, and the very famous USS Salem,
Salem.
which is in dry dock in Quincy, Massachusetts. No.
Yeah, and-
well, there's water underneath it, but
And
it's dry
as soon as we get off this live, details will be announced